So my name is Jackie Patton, and I am running to represent Ohio's 12th Congressional District in Congress. I am a strong supporter of healthcare reform, and I have been for many years. Working as a nurse, I see firsthand on the front line how our health system works. I believe that healthcare is a right, not a privilege. Regardless of if you have health care or not, in this country, you do get care. It's just that cost, if you don't have healthcare coverage, is passed on to all of us. We just don't see it. So it isn't the economically smartest way to do it. We spend way too much on medicine and procedures and things like that, way more than other countries pay. And so we have a healthcare for profit system. That system gets in the way of accessibility and, frankly, quality oftentimes. People come into the system sicker, and it costs us more money. I am a strong proponent of preventative care. I worked as an intensive care nurse. It seemed to me, after months of caring for people who were very, very sick, the sickest people, one-on-one nursing, and all the expensive resources that go in to treating those illnesses, oftentimes people were never going to get better. And 95% of the time, those the diseases that folks were suffering from were completely preventable. I've taken care of people who have been diagnosed with cervical cancer. I've told the story of one woman who sticks with me. I was a nursing student. And as a nursing student, you get to spend a lot more time at the bedside with patients because you're helping them bathe and feed and get up and dress. And so I got to know her very well and her family. And she was dying from cervical cancer, of which was completely preventable, and suffering. And so she sticks with me. She was very proud, very strong. She was a single mom. And I think of her to this day, and that was in 1996. So I have seen that play out several times over. I moved from the healthcare setting into the community setting as a licensed school nurse. And I've worked in our Columbus City schools, in our schools, with children who live in poverty and families who live in poverty. And I've spent days on the phone at times trying to get care for students. It's gotten better with Medicaid expansion. It got much better, but before Medicaid expansion, I would call several places all over the city, OSU East and different places, who would say, I'm sorry, we're not taking Medicaid patients, we're full. Or someone needed care right away, and it took 9 weeks to get them in, especially mental health care. So there's all these layers and barriers for access. I was a strong supporter of the Affordable Care Act. It wasn't perfect, because perfect would be healthcare for everyone. It was certainly a step in the right direction. We as a public have to decide if we support single-payer health care or Medicare for all, or however you want to say it, politically or not. And I think once enough people do support it and our politicians hear that loud and clear, my hope is that we'll move more quickly in that direction. The most recent tax law that went into effect, the breaks for middle class and working class folks are not permanent, where the taxes for corporations are. So that's a major factor. Two, in my opinion, any break that we might get, $1,200 in a year, I don't know, let's just throw that out there, is going to be offset by the rising cost of healthcare. And so here we have, this giveaway to working class and middle class people, so to speak, which is, I believe, smoke and mirrors, and really is not going to amount to putting more money in their pocket, which the Republicans are saying is going to put more money into our economy. I don't see it working. I don't see corporations putting that money back into people's paychecks or, they gave the bonus. But I feel like that was just another political scheme to get folks to support it and say, hey, look, this is working for me. But what we need to do as Americans is be aware of long-term consequences. So the budget bill is bartering with DACA. We'll build a wall. If you give me money for a wall, then we'll, protect dreamers. I think that is terrible. So here's 700,000, roughly 700,000 dreamers who have been hanging in the balance, wondering what's going to happen to them. And frankly, I see them as American citizens. We need to create pathways for them to citizenship. They've gotten their education here. They're highly skilled. And these are people who are contributing to our economy and our culture. And I think it's very terrible that we're bartering with their livelihood and their lives. I'm the granddaughter of an undocumented immigrant. So my grandfather came from over to Canada from Italy. He had a brother there, and they left Italy looking for a better way of life, looking for work. There was no work there. There was no work in Canada when he got there. So he had a brother here in Youngstown in the steel mills, and he said, come, there's work here. So he came over the border, and he came from work. And through naturalization, he was able to become a citizen after many years. And in 2 generations, all of his grandchildren are college educated and productive members of society. I think that's one of the most important things facing the world. I think that it has been for a long time. I'm very frustrated of the lack of urgency surrounding this issue. I would say that it is already disrupting some of the most vulnerable folks who live across the world, disrupting their lives as far as flooding, famine, water, disease. And I have children, and I'm concerned for their future. I'm concerned for the future of our planet. So I think it is a very pressing issue. And I would like to see a lot more done in relation to stopping further destruction. Now, so what does that look like, right? Each person being incentivized to reduce their carbon footprint. Stop incentivizing dirty coal plants and fracking and big organizations that are, benefiting from legislations and policies that are antiquated and old, and start incentivizing companies and folks and entrepreneurs to start with renewable energy, whether it's wind, solar, and start investing in jobs for the 21st century. I would endorse common sense gun laws. I believe in the Second Amendment rights. I'm not for going in and taking everybody's guns away. There's issues with, of course, the mass shootings. There's issues with suicide or harming others. There's issues with domestic violence. And there's issues in our inner city neighborhoods where this is a common everyday happening. Columbus City Schools, we've had record numbers of shootings this year in our communities where our schools are located. And we have children who are traumatized. We have children who don't go outside to play in their neighborhoods because their parents report that it's not safe because there's guns, because of guns going off, and they could be shot accidentally. I'm a school nurse. We had a nurse who had to respond to a drive-by shooting and treat a child for a gunshot wound. So these are, we have lockdown drills all the time, real ones, where there's either gunshots going out in the neighborhood. I run our wellness initiative. We have on-site fitness, and instructors can't get to our school to hold the class because their streets are corridored off all around the school because there's been a shooting. And so we need to, one, put common sense gun laws into place. We don't need bump stocks. We don't need military style weapons on our streets. And a military weapon is any weapon designed to kill a person, not a deer, right? So if it's designed to kill a person, they don't need to be on our streets. We need to hold gun owners accountable. So if you own a gun, it's your responsibility to lock it up. And if that gun gets into the wrong hands, there has to be some accountability and responsibility. We need to be able to protect people who are a harm to them, express that they're a harm to themselves or others by, temporarily taking that gun away if they have it, and getting them some intervention, and having mental health services available. So when people are in crisis, that there's enough services to meet the needs and the demand, which is not the case right now. So those are all things that I would support as far as protecting folks from guns. Then we have to take a look at what's going on specifically in our culture in relation to all this violence, right? So that has to be studied by the CDC, and we need to allow that to happen, and we need to fund that. So no one has the right to tell a woman what to do with her body. It is, I am pro-choice, and I think that there's so many circumstances that many of us don't understand and can't account for, that we can't regulate a woman's choice to have a baby or not. So that's one issue. Let's help women and people and families not get pregnant unintentionally. Let's put some safeguards in place. Planned Parenthood would be an excellent example of that. Equal pay, of course. Why wouldn't we pay women equally for the same work as we pay a man for? There's discrimination against women in our society, and there's some misogyny with women, and there's different standards, and we need to take a look at those. Part of the reason why I am running for Congress is, after this last election, I've always been politically minded, involved. I've canvassed, I've given to candidates, I've made phone calls, but I've worked in my community. I haven't, run for office. And so after this last election, images, which are so strong, right, started coming out of the folks making those decisions. They didn't look like me. They didn't look like my family. They didn't look like my friends. And they didn't look like the people I work with. And I think that in order for us to have the representation on these important issues that we're talking about, then our representatives need to represent all of America. And it's a problem. And so we need to start deciding what is a representative, right? Is it someone who can make a dynamic speech and has all this charisma and just, we're going to look to them to be our savior, or says all the right things and then does nothing? Or are we going to start electing folks who are working in our communities, have the experience helping people, have the experience of how legislation and policies affect our hospitals, our schools, and our communities, and take that experience and that knowledge with them and start getting some work done that actually moves the needle on some of these very important issues. And I think women are an important part of that. There's 19% representation now in Congress, and I think, there needs to be more. I think that we are politically in what I like to say a tipping point, where I don't think it matters so much as how you identify, whether it's Republican or Democratic or independent, that people as a whole are fed up, and they're going to be looking at candidates in a different way. And it's not just going to be down the ticket line. It's going to be, is this person someone who is speaking in a way about the issues that resonate with me? I think we have more in common in Middle America than we have differences. I think we say it differently, right? We come about it in a different way, but at the end of the day, I think we care about the same things. I think we care about safe communities. I think we care about the future of our children. I think we want economic stability, and I think that we want to live our lives without someone telling us what to do. So I have had several people who I've talked with who are Republicans. One gentleman came in here, and by the time he left, he gave me a hug and signed up to volunteer. He was a teacher, and again, we had different points of view, but we had more in common than we had different. We've had a wake-up call. And my hope is, and I think we're seeing it as more people come out in the street and speak up and throw their hats in the ring and get involved in whatever ways they haven't been involved in before in record numbers, that we're going to see a different dynamic. I think our politics are changing. And all I can do is talk to people, talk to them about what's important to them, and try to represent the values and the desires of the folks in the 12th district. And that's how I believe that I will connect with Republicans or independents or Democrats. So I'm a military wife, and we're a Gold Star family. And I know firsthand what it means to sacrifice for our country. My husband's a patriot. He's a true patriot. He was in the Gulf War, got out of the war. He was starting a business and a family. We were married in February of 2001, and 9/11 happened. And he stood in our bedroom doorway one night after that and said, I went to, talk to the Army today, and I have re-enlisted. I wasn't surprised. He left shortly after that, and I stayed home and held down, the fort, so to speak. Military families do what they have to do, and I was very proud of him for this. My brother-in-law lost his life serving our country, and I've stood at his funeral in Arlington National Cemetery with my mother-in-law, his widow, and their 4 young boys. I say that experience changed my husband's DNA. You go through something like that, and it changes you as a person. I have a strong desire and belief that we need to stand up for our military families and our servicemen who sacrifice so much. And most of us on a day-to-day basis don't even realize that we've been at war, and that several of these service members have deployed several times, and they have PTSD, and they have, needs. I watched my husband come out of the Army and look for a job for a year to no avail. So jobs, education, healthcare, and equipment when they're there to keep them safe. Their families, my husband has, I have a good job. We were okay financially, but he had several friends who were deployed whose wives were here with small children, and they were in financial trouble. And so you're across the country in Iraq, or the world, and you're worried about your wife and small children having enough money to buy groceries. Now, the military community does a really good job taking care of one another, but as a country, I think all of us need to be more aware of that sacrifice, what it looks like, and what it really means. And at every turn, when those service members and families need support, whether it's through legislation, whether it's through the budget, we need to do it.